A year ago, I thought my life was perfect. At 29, I was married to Damien, a man I believed was my soulmate, and we lived in a beautiful home in Houston, Texas. Our daughter Lila had just turned 3 and brought so much joy into our world. Everything seemed ideal, or at least I convinced myself it was. Damien, a 33-year-old businessman, was always busy but always provided for our family. I was a homemaker, and I took great pride in the life we were building together. Lila was the light of my life. At 3, her laughter and curiosity filled our home. I spent my days caring for her, planning her meals, playing with her, and dreaming about her future. Damien worked long hours, but I believed it was all for us. I never questioned his late nights or frequent business trips. I trusted him completely, convinced that our life was solid. Damien adored Lila, or so I thought. I watched him lift her high in the air, calling her his princess, and those moments felt so real, so genuine. But everything changed after her 3rd birthday. Damien told me he had a business trip coming up, something that didn't surprise me. I trusted him, so when he kissed me goodbye and headed out, I didn't think much of it. But a few days later, things took a dark turn. Lila caught a cold. At first, I wasn't too concerned, thinking it was just a minor illness. However, her fever skyrocketed, and by the 2nd day she was burning up, barely able to keep her eyes open. I tried everything, cool compresses, medicine, but nothing worked. She felt so fragile in my arms, and her whimpers shattered my heart. I was scared beyond belief. In my panic, I called Damien, hoping he'd come home. When he answered, I could barely choke out my words. "Damien, Lila's really sick. She has a high fever, and I don't know what to do." His response was cold and dismissive. "I'm about to board a plane, Ilara. Handle it. She'll be fine. Just give her some medicine." My voice cracked as I pleaded with him. "Damien, she needs a doctor." But his response still echoes in my mind. "I'm not canceling my business trip over a fever. You're her mother. Deal with it." Then he hung up, leaving me alone with a sick child who desperately needed help. That night, I begged him for money to save Lila, but he looked me in the eyes and said, "I don't have room for sick people in my life." Then he threw us out, replacing us with his new mistress. I stood there, crying, clutching my daughter as he slammed the door in our faces. Little did he know, that moment of betrayal awakened something inside me, something vengeful. By the time Damien woke up the next morning, his perfect world had already begun to unravel. My name is Ilara. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you I was living the dream. But now everything has changed. For a moment, I couldn't move. How could the man I had loved and trusted be so dismissive? But Lila didn't have time for me to process my shock. She needed me to act. I rushed her to the hospital, praying the entire way. The emergency room was chaos, but I begged the receptionist to help. When Dr. Wilson, a neurologist, finally examined her, his face grew serious. He explained that the fever had caused complications in her brain. "She needs surgery immediately," he said. "It's the only way to save her." My heart dropped. Surgery? My sweet, tiny Lila? "How much will it cost?" I asked, my voice trembling. Dr. Wilson hesitated. "You'll need to pay a $155,000 deposit for us to proceed." $155,000. I didn't have that kind of money, and Damien wasn't answering my calls. I texted him, left voicemails, even sent voice messages. He saw them, I know, because the messages were marked as read, but he didn't reply. My husband, the man who claimed to love our family, was ignoring us in our darkest hour. I sat in that cold hospital corridor, holding Lila's limp hand and crying like I'd never cried before. I didn't know what to do. Then it hit me. I had no choice. I ran home, grabbed my jewelry box, and returned to the hospital. I sold every piece I had, my wedding ring, family heirlooms, everything. It still wasn't enough, but I begged the jeweler to advance me the rest. By some miracle, he agreed. I handed over the deposit, and Dr. Wilson and his team moved quickly. Hours felt like years as I sat in the waiting room, praying for Lila's life. When Dr. Wilson finally came out, he gave me a small, reassuring smile. The surgery was successful. She's going to be okay. Relief washed over me and I fell to my knees, thanking him and the team for saving my daughter. Lila was alive, and that was all that mattered. But even in that moment of gratitude, questions gnawed at me. Where was Damien? Why hadn't he cared enough to respond? My heart began to crack, and though I didn't know it then, it was the beginning of the end. My perfect life was shattering, piece by piece. I had no idea what awaited me when we returned home. When Lila and I finally returned home from the hospital, I was emotionally and physically drained. All I wanted was to put her to bed and rest after the nightmare of the past few days. But as I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. Damien's car was parked in the driveway. My heart lifted for a brief moment. Maybe he was here to explain, to apologize. Maybe I'd misunderstood his silence during Lila's crisis. Carrying Lila in my arms, I approached the door. I could see the lights on inside and hear muffled voices. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I opened the door, and what I saw stopped me in my tracks. Damien was standing in the living room with a young woman I'd never seen before. She was tall, with perfect hair and a smug smile that made my stomach turn. They were laughing, standing far too close for it to be innocent. Lila whimpered in my arms, sensing my tension. "Damien," I said, my voice trembling. "Who is this?" He turned to me, his expression calm, almost indifferent. "This is Serafina," he said, as if introducing an old friend. "We're together now." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "Together? What are you talking about, Damien?" I said, my voice rising. "I just came back from the hospital with our daughter. Do you even care what she's been through? What I've been through?" His response was a dagger to my heart. "Alara," he said coldly, "I've made my decision. You and Lila can manage on your own from now on. I don't need sick people dragging me down." I stared at him in disbelief. Was this really the man I'd built a life with, the father of my child? The room seemed to spin as his words sank in. "You're leaving us?" I whispered. Serafina stepped forward, her smile widening. "It's not personal," she said in a sickly sweet tone. "Damien and I have something you don't understand." I couldn't hold back anymore. "How dare you!" I shouted, my anger finally breaking through my shock. "I've been holding this family together while you've been off playing with your little girlfriend. Do you even know what I had to do to save our daughter's life? I sold everything, my wedding ring, my mother's necklace, all because you didn't care enough to answer your phone." Damien shrugged, his face expressionless. "That's your problem, Alara, not mine." Before I could say another word, he walked to the door and opened it. "You need to leave," he said firmly. "I've already packed your things, they're outside." I could hardly process what was happening. "You're kicking us out?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Where are we supposed to go, Damien?" "This is Lila's home." His response was cold and final. "It's my house," he said. "You'll figure it out." Serafina, standing by the door with a smug look, added, "Good luck, Alara," her tone dripping with feigned sympathy. I stood there, holding Lila tightly in my arms, her warm little body against mine. In that moment, her presence gave me the strength I needed to stay composed. "You'll regret this, Damien," I said, my voice steady despite the tears running down my cheeks. "You're a coward and a liar, and I'll make sure everyone knows it." He didn't flinch. His only response was dismissive. "Do what you need to do," before he slammed the door in my face. Outside in the frigid night air, I was overcome with a mix of rage and heartbreak. I looked down at Lila, her innocent face so unaware of the betrayal she had just suffered. "It'll be okay," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "We'll get through this. I promise." With nowhere else to turn, I called Grace, my best friend. She answered on the first ring, her voice laced with concern. "Alara, what's wrong?" I spilled everything to her: Lila's illness, the hospital, Damien's betrayal, and how he had thrown us out. Without hesitation, Grace responded, "Come to me," her voice firm. "I'll meet you at the shelter. You're not alone in this." When I arrived at the women's shelter where Grace worked, she enveloped me in a tight hug. "You're safe now," she whispered. "We'll figure this out together." In the following days, I confided in Grace about everything: Damien's sudden coldness, his betrayal, and the way he had chosen Serafina over his family. She listened intently, her face a mixture of anger and sadness. One evening, she looked at me seriously. "Alara," she said, "I think there's more to this. Damien doesn't just walk away from his family without a reason. Something doesn't add up." "What do you mean?" I asked, though deep down I already suspected she was right. Grace leaned forward, her expression intense. "I think Damien is hiding something, and I know someone who can help us find out." That's how I met Ethan, a private investigator Grace trusted. He was in his early 40s with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through me. "I'll dig into Damien's life," he said. "If there's anything to uncover, I'll find it." I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew one thing for certain: I needed answers. Damien had torn apart my life, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. As I waited for Ethan's findings, I focused on Lila, who was slowly recovering. Her laughter was quieter now, her energy lessened, but she was alive, and that was all that mattered. Yet the anger inside me simmered. Damien had abandoned us, betrayed us, and I wasn't going to let him walk away unpunished. Whatever secrets he was hiding, I was determined to uncover them. I didn't know it yet, but the truth was going to change everything. A week after meeting Ethan, I sat in Grace's small office at the shelter, anxiously awaiting his arrival with the results of his investigation. My mind raced with questions. What was Damien hiding? Was this betrayal just the beginning? Lila played quietly in the corner, her soft giggles providing some comfort in the chaos. When Ethan finally walked in, his face grim, my stomach twisted. He carried a folder under his arm, and the look in his eyes made it clear that he had found something significant. "Alara," he said, placing the folder on the desk, "you need to brace yourself. What I've uncovered isn't just about infidelity, it's much worse." My heart dropped. Grace squeezed my hand in silent support, her way of letting me know I wasn't alone. "Tell me," I said, my voice steady, though the storm inside me was only just beginning. Ethan opened the folder, revealing photos, documents, and transaction records. "Damien and Serafina aren't just having an affair," he explained. "They're business partners, illegal business partners. They've been running fraudulent schemes, laundering money, and even funneling funds into offshore accounts." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're saying Damien's a criminal?" Ethan nodded. "And he's been doing this for years. It's likely he's been using his legitimate business as a front. Serafina isn't just his mistress, she's his accomplice. Together, they've built a web of lies and illegal activities." The room felt like it was spinning. This was the man I had trusted with my life, the father of my child. I had suspected betrayal, but I never imagined this level of deceit. "How do you know all of this?" I asked, struggling to process the information. Ethan gestured to the documents. I traced his financial transactions, interviewed a few of his former employees, and dug into public records. Everything here points to their involvement in criminal activities. They've even been under the radar of federal authorities, but so far they've managed to avoid detection. Grace leaned forward, her voice firm. "Alara, this changes everything. Damien isn't just a cheater, he's a criminal. You need to protect yourself and Lila. We have to take this to the authorities." I nodded, the anger in me boiling to the surface. Damien had destroyed our family, abandoned his child, and now I found out he had been living a double life as a fraud? What do we do? I asked, determined to fight back. Grace and Ethan shared a glance before Ethan spoke. We start by building a case. The evidence I've gathered is solid, but we'll need more to ensure he and Serafina face justice. You'll need a lawyer, a good one. Grace didn't hesitate. I know someone who can help. Let me make a call. That's how I met Megan, a sharp and determined lawyer who specialized in cases like mine. She was in her early 40s with a calm confidence that immediately put me at ease. Ilara, she said during our first meeting, you've been through hell, but we're going to turn this around. With the evidence Ethan has collected, we can not only expose Damien's crimes but also ensure you and Lila get what you deserve. Over the next few days, Megan and Ethan worked tirelessly to strengthen the case. Megan filed for an emergency order to protect me and Lila, while Ethan coordinated with local authorities to bring Damien's illegal activities to light. I was overwhelmed by the support I received from Grace, from Megan, from Ethan. For the first time since Damien had kicked us out, I felt a glimmer of hope. The turning point came when Ethan orchestrated a raid on one of Damien's business properties. With the help of law enforcement, they caught Damien and Serafina red-handed, finalizing a fraudulent deal. The arrest was swift, and the news spread quickly. Watching the footage of Damien being led away in handcuffs was surreal. This man, who had once been the center of my world, now looked like a stranger. When Megan called to tell me the charges against Damien and Serafina were solid, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that justice was finally catching up to them, but sadness for the life Lila and I had lost. Still, I knew we couldn't move forward until this chapter was closed. The court date was set, and Megan assured me we had a strong case. Ilara, she said, you're going to have to testify. The court needs to hear your story, the sacrifices you've made, the betrayal you've endured. Are you ready for that? I hesitated. The thought of standing in front of a judge and strangers was daunting, but then I looked at Lila, playing happily in the corner of the room, her laughter a reminder of what I was fighting for. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I'm ready. As the trial approached, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. Damien had tried to break me, to destroy our family, but I wasn't going to let him win. With Megan, Grace, and Ethan by my side, I knew I had the strength to face him and to ensure that justice was served. I had no idea just how much this battle would push me to my limits. The day of the trial arrived, and I stood outside the courthouse, Lila's hand tightly clasped in mine. Her innocent eyes looked up at me, full of trust, reminding me why I had to face this day. It wasn't just for me, it was for her, for our future. Grace and Megan stood by my side, their unwavering support grounding me. Soon, Ethan arrived, his calm confidence offering me a much-needed sense of reassurance. We've got this, Ilara, he said. The evidence is solid. As we stepped into the courtroom, my heart pounded. The room, with its imposing judge's bench and rows of seats, felt intimidating. Across from us sat Damien and Serafina, their lawyers surrounding them like a protective barrier. Damien caught my eye and smirked, as if this were all a game. I swallowed my anger, instead focusing on Lila, who was sitting safely with Grace in the gallery. The trial began with the opening statements. Megan's voice was calm and commanding as she laid out our case. Damien's betrayal, his illegal activities, and his abandonment of his family. As I listened, pride swelled within me. This was no longer just my fight, it was a collective effort to expose the truth. When it was my turn to testify, my legs wobbled as I made my way to the stand. With my hand on the Bible, I swore to tell the truth, and I did. I recounted everything. Lila's illness, Damien's indifference, the heartbreak of selling my jewelry to afford her treatment, and the cruelty of returning home to find him with Serafina, then being thrown out onto the streets. The courtroom was eerily silent, all eyes on me. Drawing strength from Lila's reassuring smile in the gallery, I answered Megan's questions without hesitation, holding nothing back. Damien's defense team attempted to paint him as a misunderstood businessman, claiming I had overreacted and that his relationship with Serafina was a private matter. But Megan was relentless. Piece by piece, she tore apart his arguments, presenting undeniable evidence of his fraudulent activities. Thanks to Ethan's meticulous work, there were no gaps for them to exploit. At one point, Megan asked, "Mr. Johnson, why did you ignore your wife's desperate pleas for help when your daughter was critically ill?" Damien squirmed in his seat, his charm faltering. "I was busy," he muttered. "Busy with Serafina, perhaps?" Megan pressed, holding up proof of his stay at a luxury resort during Lila's surgery. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom as Damien's face flushed with embarrassment. Serafina's testimony sealed their fate. Under pressure, she admitted to her role in the fraudulent activities, implicating Damien even further. By the end, their web of lies had unraveled completely. Judge Walker, stern and thorough, reviewed the evidence with care. Her verdict was decisive. This court finds Damien Johnson and Serafina Reed guilty of multiple counts of fraud and money laundering. Their actions were not only illegal but reprehensible, showing a complete disregard for family and the law. Turning to me, her voice softened. "Mrs. Johnson, your courage in coming forward is commendable. This court awards you full custody of Lila and all legal assets belonging to Mr. Johnson, excluding those tied to his crimes." Tears streamed down my face as I heard those words. Damien and Serafina were sentenced to long-term prison terms. Justice had been served, and the weight of betrayal began to lift from my shoulders. Outside the courthouse, Grace wrapped me in a tight embrace. "You did it, Alara," she said, her voice filled with pride. Ethan, his usual seriousness now tinged with satisfaction, added, "You earned this victory." On the drive back to the shelter, peace began to wash over me. Lila slept peacefully in her car seat, her tiny hand still clutching mine, even in her dreams. Grace turned to me with a smile. "What's next for you?" she asked. "A fresh start," I replied, determination in my voice. "A home for Lila and me where we can be safe and happy." In the weeks that followed, small victories began to restore my hope. Grace helped me find a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Megan guided me in managing the assets, ensuring our financial security. I started volunteering at the shelter, giving back to the place that had saved us when we had nothing. One evening, as I tucked Lila into bed, she asked softly, "Mommy, are we happy now?" Stroking her hair, I whispered, "Yes, sweetheart, we're happy and safe. This is just the beginning of a beautiful life." That night, as I sat in our little living room, I reflected on our journey, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the fight for justice. It had all led to this moment. I wasn't the same woman I once was. I had grown stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. I looked ahead, eager to give Lila the life she deserved. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly free.